On this episode of Athletic Training Chat, we have Dr. Phil Vardiman, who was my advisor when I was in grad school at the University of Kansas. So I've known him for quite some time now, and always loosely stayed in touch. Been fortunate to run into each other at NATA a couple times. But Dr. Vardiman does a lot when it comes to athletic training. He is all over the place with his role in academics, which we talk about, and he shares some changes coming there. His role in research, being in academics, being still active in the clinical setting, especially with USA Track and Field and some of the other things that we talk about in this episode with what he's doing. And then also in service, does a ton with the Kansas Athletic Trainers Society and the group there, and also on the national level. So somebody who does a lot. We talk a lot about how to balance that all, which, again, sharing some news as he does in this episode, brings some insight into that and making sure that you're trying to do everything you can at the highest level to really get the most out of it. So I appreciate him sharing all of that with us. And so, yeah, great episode. Very interesting guy in a great way. And I've been fortunate to know him throughout my career. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Can't thank them enough, as always, for supporting us and as the podcast, and then also the profession as a whole. NATA is coming up. Go check them out. They have a lot in store this year. Unfortunately, won't be there to help them out with that, but definitely check them out, as they always got something new to show you. But without further ado, please enjoy this episode. So welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Dr. Phil Vardiman, who I have known for quite a while. He was actually my academic supervisor back in grad school at the University of Kansas. So we won't talk about how many years ago that was, but have stayed in touch in general throughout the time. I was spent some time in the Big 12, so we connected, run into each other a few times at NATA. We are way overdue on having this conversation, which we talked about at the last NATA, and it is now almost April of the following year. But Dr. Vardiman has been involved in a lot of things. We were just talking about a little bit of more of what he got involved in this past weekend, but we're going to talk about all of those and how he ties it all together. But first, before we get into that, wanted to turn over to you to fill in kind of your background, and then we'll get started.
Hi, Joel. Thanks for having me and being on the show. And this is pretty cool. I've listened to almost all of these podcasts, and it's really neat to be on here and just chat with you and to see some of the things that you've done and how you've grown in your career. So that's always exciting. I think that's one of the best parts of what I do as an athletic trainer is to see young athletic trainers continue to develop and grow and be influential in our career path and our profession. So thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you being on.
So I'm Phil Vardiman. I'm the program director for the athletic training program here at Kansas State University. Um, I've been here since 2015. Previously was at the University of Kansas, right down the road, as both the clinical coordinator and the program director for a little while. I basically my kind of current job is just as a professor managing the program, but teaching classes both at the undergraduate and graduate level, research, and then just service basically. So just kind of working through. And then my role as the state president here and on the board at MAATA is kind of winding down. So I've now moved over to the president-elect role. So that's kind of freed up some time, actually. So we're kind of in the middle of a lot of transition. So it's kind of nice and refreshing, especially as we're moving into spring. There's kind of a little symbolism there. So our last district meeting at MAATA in Omaha was kind of fun to know that there's going to be some new things coming down the road, but then also to know it was a little sad to have my last meeting as a board member for the state. So until they put me on something else, I guess we'll see what happens.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the first questions. You listed off a bunch of the things you're involved in. Obviously, the full-time teaching job and being the program director, which brings its own unique aspects to it. The research, the service, but then also I know you've done a lot of work with USA Track and Field and done traveling with them as well. So still keeping that clinical side to it. How do you balance them all? You referenced a little bit, with one thing kind of leaving, and opening up a little bit of time, but as soon as I'm sure you will get tied into something else here. But yeah, how do you balance all that and kind of ensure one doesn't overtake another more than you'd like it to?
Well, we kind of spoke before we hit record here, and I was going to kind of be very honest and open. So that's actually a struggle for me, and it's not uncommon for things to kind of get a little lopsided, and for one part of my career and one part of my life to start to take over in one aspect. So for me, I'm actually stepping down as a program director here at Kansas State University to just move back into research here at K-State because I'm just not able to balance those very well. And I need to do more research. And so we actually are making some transitions, and we've hired a new faculty member that will be joining us. So they're going to move into clinical coordinator, and one of the faculty here is going to move up into the program director role. And so I've kind of been going through that transition of what I had as an identity for since 2005. And technically, I was doing some clinical work when I was at Arkansas from 2000 to 2005. So, but didn't have the title, so we won't count that. But
Sure,
kind of look at that. I mean, that's been almost 20 years of being an administrator for an athletic training program at in a higher ed institution. So that's an interesting time for me is to figure out what that's going to look like. But I'm excited about having the opportunity to be able to move to that research side that I formerly was really passionate about. But it's just the master's level is a different beast than the undergraduate programs, and I think any program director um, that's doing this now is feeling it because we've gone from what used to be a 9-month faculty position where we had fall and spring semesters to now where most programs that I'm aware of are running year round, and so we don't have the summers to catch up, and our clinical experiences look different, and um, it's exciting and it's great, but it doesn't leave a lot of time for you to get other things done and balance
sure,
as much. And the kids are, let's just call it what it is. The kids are paying a lot more money for their education now, and they are deserving of somebody who's going to be there all the time to help them with their educational components. And so I think it's really important to have somebody that's going to be on point 100%. And so I've tried to do that in my role here. I've done the best I could to do that, and we've done well. But I think it's time for me to do more research. So I know that I'm not going to be able to dedicate 100% of me to them. And so that is something that, I've decided, and it took some time for me to come to that decision. But my department head and a couple of my mentors here at K-State have really been good sounding boards to kind of talk me through, my next goals career-wise. And I've also found that in some cases, for your career, sometimes you have to take charge of that yourself. And you can't wait for somebody else to kind of say, hey, I think you need to think about doing this. Like you have to do it yourself and find that, or it's not going to happen. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now is moving to that part of my life to get in line with yeah, other career goals that I have. So that's kind of been the big change, but that really kind of encompasses balance for me is trying to figure out what's lopsided and what really needs to be done. And I think the biggest things for me have been just reflecting. We talk about reflection a lot with students, and we do it every day. I mean, after we have, conversation or an argument or whatever, we're always trying to figure out how we either win the argument or stay out of the argument kind of thing, right? So that's
Sure.
just that's our reflection that we do. But then the next step for me has just been redirection. So what's my next steps and what do I need to do? And I don't mind sharing as well. Sorry for excuse me. Um, for me, as a as faith has started to become more important to me and my family, we've prayed about what we need to be doing to be better and put us in a better direction and a better space, and to make sure that we're making time for our family, our faith, and ourselves. So and I think they're all kind of tied together. But
Sure.
it's definitely been a rewarding experience, and it's been a lot of fun. So I mean, we're going through all this, in this self. Um, and so we're kind of evolving a little bit as a family with the transition. Both of my kids are out of school. They're here at K-State, but they're both out of the house. They're in college. So it's, the dynamic at the house is different. So there's been lots of change all at once. And um, so we're just trying to make that as positive as we can. Um, I'm looking at my notes here and cheating a
No,
little
you're
bit.
good. You're good.
Yeah. I kind of, yeah, I guess the one thing that I've seen, and I'm sure other people have kind of experienced this too, but things come in waves, right? So, as we're balancing, as we think about right now, we have, kind of a little wave that's coming through with, advising for our master students that graduate in May, right? So that's a big push to get all these papers read and get that stuff out and get these students ready for their presentations, and that kind of thing. And but then there's some cases there's big tsunamis that come through your life that just kind of overtake everything, and sometimes you just have to really stop and get your head above water, and that's a big important thing, and it's taken a lot to kind of get to a point to where I can handle that better, and be able to still balance. So I've had to keep my feet firmly planted on the ground, but then also make sure that my feet are planted both at home and at work. And that's something that's been great. And I'm very blessed to have a wonderful wife. And Bethany and I met through athletic training, and I'll tell that story a little bit later. But that was, um, I'm very lucky to have the support that I have from her, and my family and her family for that matter. It's just been great. So yeah, I don't know.
So you
Anything
kind of
else?
talked about, oh, no, you're good. I was just trying to figure out how to formulate this next question a little bit. Um, finding the balance you mentioned and, having so many interests and, for doing one aspect of your job for so long, but now wanting to focus more on the research side. But then again, however much you want to share on and touch on it with the actual clinical side, all the way back to your time at Arkansas. But again, what I know that you've stayed involved with mainly from seeing pictures of you traveling to some more exotic place around the world with USA Track and Field. But why has it been important for you to be involved in all of these aspects of the AT profession?
So for me, the education piece, I kind of involved in that. It was when I was at Oklahoma State, we were given the opportunity to teach. Um, and I liked it. I liked getting up in front of a room and talking with students and seeing aha moments for them. I mean, it was just a care and prevention class, but it was great to listen to them and get emails from them a couple years later, like, hey, we got to do this and was thinking about you. And anyway, so I think the teaching aspect is good in terms of um, kind of how that's helped me grow. It's kept me on point. And so I guess the best way to describe this, everything that I'm involved with is kind of helping me stay in uh, current trends, and that big phrase now within educational programs is contemporary expertise. But I mean, for me, I'm just trying to stay relevant. So, I mean, I see so many um, athletic trainers that, and specifically in education, and I see more of us trying to stay involved clinically. And I think that's exactly why. And I think as more of us are kind of becoming tied to, I don't want to say medical schools, all the programs are tied to medical schools, but we see, physicians have practices that they have to continue. So if you're in a medical program, you're teaching, you still have to practice. And I noticed in my PhD when I was at the University of Arkansas, I was working as an athletic trainer, and I think back in those days, and I can't even imagine how there's no way I could do that now. But, managing a huge team at the U of A, taking 6 to 9 credits of, PhD level courses, and then teaching 6 credits of courses, and then trying to start a family. That like I just it's a blur. That time frame is a blur. But what it we did it because we had to, and but the one thing that I took away from that experience of doing a lot of those things was the students responded well when you were clinically practicing, and they knew you were doing it, so you were in the trenches where they wanted to be. And it's very similar to the preceptors that our students go out to work with and to learn from, is they really look at them and they respect the heck out of them because of their the expertise that they're providing, because they're in the field and they're doing it. And so I think that for me, that was one of the goals that I had for the rest of my career, was to continue to maintain a foot in practice as much as I could. And a lot of that has developed into some of the things that I'm so involved in. I thought, I in 2019, I got my goal of being a head athletic trainer for USA Track and Field down at the Pan Am Games. So it's been a little while since I've actually traveled with USA Track, and would like to kind of get back in that mix. But and I'm not sure if that's going to be in the cards or not. So it's just, I continue to put my applications in like everybody else, and
Sure.
we'll see what happens. It's a great staff, and it's a great group of people, and I really enjoyed it. But I tell you, it's a lot to take on and be a part of, and but the folks are great. The relationships and the staff, it's wonderful, and I've got lots of great memories, and I have lots of amazing friends now, that I mean lifelong friends from trips, but just overall experiences and working with those folks. And I think that they would say the same, is that those experiences, they propel you to a different level, because I can't tell you how I came back from the Olympic Games in 2016 with a little bit of swagger, I'll be honest, because we had no, you have this great environment of team. You know, it's a true sports medicine interdisciplinary team, and you're working together with all of these folks who all have the same mindset and goal to get athletes on the podium and to do it in a very healthy way. And so I haven't experienced that in any other scenario in my career where everybody checks their ego at the door and everybody's trying to work at the same goal together. And the communication was such a high level and it was so easy. It was amazing. We all got tired. We all got a little cranky, but we started taking care of each other and we were able to really manage that. And we did really well that year. And so it's just a lot of fun to be involved with and be a part of. So I think for me, just in seeing my other friends who are older, like myself, I'll say I'm old. I'm not old, but I'm older. That we appreciate those opportunities to continue to test our mettle and
Hmm.
to we can continue to hang. You know, it's I worked a women's lacrosse tournament here at K-State this weekend. And I've not, you know, I came from the Midwest. We didn't have lacrosse, right? And so I've worked men's before, and so I didn't know what the difference would be. So it was just, you know, I try to do these things to put myself in a situation to learn and to be able to carry that into the classroom and talk about these are things that I've seen, and this is, you know, these are different environments, things to think about. But, you know, you kind of lose track of, you know, I have to go back to the days of, okay, what do I have to put in my kit? You know, just basic things. And you're like, oh, okay, here we go. And you're brushing off those old things and, you forget stuff. And so, but sticking yourself back in that environment, I'm less likely to forget those if I had to, help out in the future. So it's refreshing, to be able to do that and be outside. I mean, how many jobs get to go out and watch sports and get paid? You
Right.
know, I'm not digging ditches. I mean, I deal with some stuff. Everybody does, but I mean, come on. There's a lot of people that would trade places with us for a couple of weeks until they figured out how much of work it was. Just do what I say anyway. So anyway, I just think for me, I think maintaining clinical relevance is important and just staying engaged. That's why I think it's important for me to stay active, when my hands dirty a little bit. It thing it lends itself to is I'm talking with, as a president, they couldn't argue that I wasn't an athletic trainer, that I'm just an educator, because there's sometimes you get that label. Oh, you're
Sure.
just an educator. You don't know what it's like in the field anymore. And so I think it's important for me. I'm lucky to be able to do some of my clinical stuff at a high level, but it's still clinical and I'm still active. And, I'm proud of doing that. So,
Yeah, I know for me, I haven't gone into the education side, but now just being in a different role where I work with a orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine docs, and yeah, I'm not getting as much hands-on as I would in, a traditional setting, but just being around and seeing how the surgeon, who's a shoulder and knee guy, like how he approaches different injuries, seeing a whole variety of different injuries. We're not just exclusively sports by any means, but then even like the imaging and the MRIs and what is and is not as quote unquote concerning. Obviously, it all plays in context. I'd go back and be a completely different clinician when it comes to my evaluation and probably even my rehab approach if I were to go back into a collegiate setting or something like that, just because I've seen it from such a different vantage point and understanding that not everything is surgical. In most cases, a lot isn't. But just how to manage that, it would completely change how I approached a lot of things, especially from my eval wise. So I can understand how just getting those different vantage points can be super valuable.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anytime that you can get a different look at how to approach, I mean, there's always 15 different ways to, get to the problem. And, you know, you just have to find out what works best for you and what's going to be best for the patient at the end of the day. And having these different, touches from different areas can really give you an opportunity to look at things differently. And, I'll tell you with USA Track, man, I was exposed to some very interesting like uh, modalities and different things that, I use today. And the fun part is to try to take that back and you ask somebody, okay, so can you give me the physiological reason? Like, how does this work? And they're like, man, I have no idea. I just know that it works. And you try to go back to the office and try to figure it out. Like,
Right.
how, so, I mean, I think the funniest anecdote is, I had a friend he was talking about how you could stop nosebleeds. And like, if you had just this massive nosebleed, and this works, by the way, and we've actually used it on our daughter. So it's and we know it's reflexology, but we can't figure out the true mechanism. And when I do, we'll come back on the podcast and I'll deliver this
Fair
information.
enough. Fair enough.
So if you have just a massive nosebleed coming out of both nostrils, you take the leg, you lay them down on their back, and you put them in basically in a hamstring stretch, and then you just dorsiflex the foot as far as you can when their hamstring is just as tight as you can get it, and you punch their heel 3 times, and I'm dead serious. It will stop like you're shutting off a faucet. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And this was something that I learned on a USA track trip. We didn't have a nosebleed. We were just talking about random stuff you've learned. And so we were actually funny. We were in Rio, and one of my buddies called from a football game. And, the time change was just enough that he calls, he goes, okay, so walk me through this. How do we do this? And we walked him through it. And you, everybody was like, okay, we're on the phone. And he was like, it worked. It was the craziest thing. So, it's, anyway, so, some of the things we try to explain through evidence, right?
Right.
Obviously. But some things they just work. And that's just been fun to learn crazy stuff that you can actually help somebody. So my daughter was in cheerleading and she got smacked in the face because she was a base and the kid came down and elbowed her right in the face and she couldn't get her she couldn't get her nose to stop bleeding. And so we did that and it stopped. It was amazing because she was bleeding all over the mat. It was pretty bad. But
He's
that
just
was
picking one leg to put in the
yeah,
hamstring.
just one leg. Just
Just
pull it back
doesn't
and just
matter which
punch it
one, you
hard.
just give it a try.
Well, the thought was so you would do it on the side that the nostril's bleeding, but if
Got it.
both sides are going, you pull one back and you just punch it, and it just we know it's neurological, but we don't know how. Like I
Right.
just and that's my next goal. And so if there's a reflexologist that watches this podcast and wants to
Sure.
give me that understanding, but I people can say it's crazy and I don't have any evidence to back it up, but I can tell you the next time you got somebody that you can't get controlled, that it works. It's so weird. But those are the things I think that make our career fun and are just exciting to try to figure out the why. We're trying to figure out our own whys, but to figure out, why do we do things? And I think that, you play the what if games and all these things to what are you going to do and how you're going to treat these things. And I think that's what makes our career exciting. It's just cool. It's fun.
Agreed.
So yeah.
Just as a little side note, just because I think you referenced it, and I've tried it a couple of times, but with all your work with USA Track, if someone was interested, how would they go about
Sorry.
trying to be a part of that?
Um, sorry about that.
No worries.
So for USA Track. So if you want to be involved with that, it's through the volunteer program. So USA Track, I believe they're still at 5 years minimum experience. I think the USOPC has changed to 3 years now. So after you have 3 years experience, that you can apply to be a part of that, and they kind of go hand in hand. Um, so the main reason that I got involved with USA Track is a friend, colleague, mentor, Jack Ranson from Oklahoma State actually had asked me, we were at St. Louis convention, and asked if I would be interested in going on a trip. They just had somebody bail on, wasn't able to go on an international trip. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in going. And so, I said, let me talk to my wife. And so I did. And why not? So I ended up going to Russia with race walkers, right? And so that was kind of my introduction to USA Track and Field. And um, the I guess the only thing that's kind of tied to it, this philosophical, and I share this with my students all the time, is if you're given an opportunity, it's like when we get our students interview potential, or we get them to at least have a conversation with somebody, it's what you do after. And so when I was given that opportunity, I just went in with the attitude like I have to crush this. Like I just have to make this the best experience for these athletes. And it went well. And so they actually evaluate you, the coaches evaluate you on your performance as an actual athletic trainer, but then also, just how you are as a person, and are you easy to work with? And so if you don't work out, then you're not asked back. And so, from 2008 to, 2019, I was involved and constantly evaluated. And that's another challenge in itself. But as you work with that group, you also have to go through the USOPC volunteer system. So if you want to travel internationally for large games like Olympic, Paralympic, Pan Am games, those are all considered part of USOPC run. You have to get your volunteer experience at the Olympic training centers. So you have to spend 2 weeks out there, and that's a lot of fun. It really is. And different NGBs, so national governing bodies, will kind of do things a little bit differently. Some support you. And so the equine folks actually, they paid for the massage therapist to come when I was there in Colorado Springs. Like and they were paying part of her salary. So while she was gone. And it was really cool. Like they also have big pockets because, horses are expensive. So
Right.
anyway, they were able to afford to be able to do that. Not every NGB is going to do that, but the volunteer experience at the Olympic Training Center is amazing. So I mean, even if you're not going to travel internationally with folks, to go out there and volunteer as an athletic trainer, and you talk about taking your skill set to another level. I learned a lot when I was there from other folks that were also volunteering at the time. But then you're able to teach too. So you got to remember you're bringing a lot of experience to the table. So you get to go there. And you also, I've got friends now I still stay in touch with that I did my 2 weeks with in Colorado Springs. I mean, and I was lucky. I got a great group, and we still stay in contact. Like it's great. So um, so once you've gotten your experience, and you continue to go through that selection process, it's pretty fun. It's just, so you just gotta get out there, and they usually, like USA Track is got a very good handle on how they develop their sports medicine teams, and they start them with small teams, make sure they're doing okay. And then they start with getting you involved with like juniors, and then they
Hmm.
move you into like the more adult teams. But basically, the reason they start you with juniors is because that's the group that you're going to kind of grow with. So when
Sure.
those kids are going to end up at the Olympics, you're at the sports medicine team that's taking them to the Olympics. So you get to know them over multiple trips. And that's a really good design. And you do get to develop those relationships with those athletes, and there's always new faces, but it's neat to really get to know those athletes as patients, but also friends in some cases. So I still stay in contact with some retired people that are just amazing human beings doing some amazing things. And that's just, it's pretty cool. So,
It's awesome.
yeah.
So we talked a lot about all the things that you're doing, kind of some shifting with different focuses. But then, as we were talking off camera before, and even in different conversations, you've also started working with some people at Fort Riley out by you all, if you wouldn't mind talking about that as well.
Well, so, okay. Um, I I walked into that situation. So I was giving a presentation here at K-State on a research project that we had ongoing with the Office of Naval Research. So we had a grant at the University of Kansas that I brought. I was still the PI for that grant when I first started here at K-State. So I was giving a presentation to um, other faculty and staff on what that was all about. And there was a gentleman that was in the room at the time who is responsible for all military affairs between Kansas State University and Fort Riley specifically, but he works not just with Fort Riley, but all military bases and all armed forces across all branches, right? But he had someone reach out to him in regards to needing some help developing a sports medicine team for the best ranger competition team at Fort Riley. And this was before the Holistic Health and Fitness Initiative had kicked off. And so when Dr. DeGroat reached out to me, and he's a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army, when he reached out, he said, "Can you help with this? You sound like somebody who would know how to do this and be able to help." And so we did. We stood up a small sports medicine team. So we had sports psych, nutrition, and then myself. Um, being on the academic side, I don't have, access to all the facilities, but the athletic trainers here at K-State were great and they let us use their facilities. So they got me a key card because they didn't want to come in that early during their off season. And I don't blame them. So we were coming in about 5 a.m. to get these guys through some different sessions. So we had some recovery things for them, and they were using the HydroWorks tub. And really what it came down to is we kind of evaluated at the end of the season, we were doing something special for a very elite group of people, and it made them feel special, I guess is the best way to put it. And that team ended up, we had one group that finished fifth place that year, and that is the best that the Big Red One, first division has ever done, ever in the history of the Best Ranger competition team. So the commanding general was at the time was so excited about this that he gave everybody from K-State that was involved with it a community, a commander's community service award, basically. And so that was interesting for us to get that, and just for helping his team. But it was a way for him to say thank you and recognize the folks that had given up their time, and because we weren't paid, obviously. But I can tell you that of the folks that were involved with that team and future teams, a number, specifically the sports psych folks, have actually ended up working military after that experience of volunteering with those groups. Then, we continue to do that. And it's been hard, to kind of navigate deployment and support from the, the commander level for the Fort Riley. So they have to kind of sign off on all of these things. So in some cases, the best ranger competition teams from other units, they get to, like, mid-November until the competition, all they do is train. So they take them out of their job, and that's their job now, is to just train up and get ready for this competition. And so that's an advantage. And so in some cases, we had our soldiers that we're working with from Fort Riley who were not given that time off, and they had to train around their jobs. And in fact, the trying to remember what year that was. I actually got to go down and watch the competition. So the Army flew me down to watch it at Fort Moore, used to be Fort Benning. And so as we're, kind of going through all of this, they were training for this competition, which is 62 or 64 hours long. So they
Oof.
start and they just go for 62 hours straight of all this different physical activity, mental activity, navigation, all kinds of advanced Army stuff that they have to do, and it's pretty amazing. You can watch it online. So, I mean, if you really want to be amazed, these athletes are crazy. Anyway, these guys were able to still get 13th place. Obviously, it wasn't a podium finish, but they got 13th place, and they were training around their jobs in Poland in feet of snow. Like they were still doing all their training and getting ready for this competition. And
That
so they flew them back from Poland. They did the competition and then they flew them back. And to me, that was just it really it got to me here in my heart, really to know that what little service I was doing for these guys and how appreciative they were of what I was able to help them put together. It meant to them because they were doing all of this because they don't have to do it. They don't have to be on that team, so they're choosing to do that. So, but to have somebody else that wanted to help them be successful was pretty neat. That was pretty cool. So we continue to do that. In fact, I've got two teams down at Fort Moore right now prepping for this year's comp. So they've been able to get the time off and they've been training. And so having these guys come in uh, to my office here at K-State and get some help and get some care and little things. I mean, it's never taken a lot of my time, but it's been great to be involved with. And these guys are crazy. They did a 13, let's see, they did basically a marathon morning workout. So they got up and they rucked, so full ruck 13.1 miles, and then they ran 13.1 miles after they dropped their rucks, and then they had to do it in their uniform and their boots. And of course, so the guys, some of the care I was giving was blisters, obviously, but I
sure
mean, they came in, it was just, and that's a lot, and that's their morning workout. So it's intense, but they love it. That's a different, we need to all be thankful for the, the men and women that have that attitude of like, okay, what's next? And you're throwing everything you can at them to challenge them. And they're like, okay, what's next? And it challenges you to think beyond that. And that's cool to make yourself better.
for sure.
You got to get outside of your comfort zone. So pretty neat.
Awesome. Well, anything else around kind of combining so many aspects of athletic training that we haven't covered that you'd like to touch on?
No, I think the for me the biggest things is, it's good to be involved, but you got to find the balance. And it's really easy to not say no and get over involved. And as much as we plan, the tsunamis come and you have lots on your plate already, that gets overwhelming pretty fast. And so, making sure that you have room, it's kind of that, philosophical, you always have to make, everybody has a full plate, but we always have to make room for something else and somebody else, right, on your plate.
Hmm.
And so making sure you save some space, because if you're at 100% capacity and then you take something else on, something else is going to fall off. I had a really good friend, somebody I respect very, very much. And he asked me one day, he goes, how do you balance? And I said, I've learned now that I have to do less because, if I had to grade myself out on so many things at the same time, I would probably give myself like a B or a B plus. And when I was in college, that was acceptable. But, if you want to excel in your career, you can't give B work, right? And you may have somebody else grading you differently. You
Sure.
want to. I think I'm the hardest. I'm the biggest critic of myself and what's going on. But I think that if we look at balance, we've got to make sure that we can give our best effort in all those different components. And so just making sure that you don't, you know, overcommit. It's really easy. I think that, we hear people say that, but when you're in it, it can be overwhelming, especially as you continue to move up into different committees or different things that have true responsibility. I mean, you have to perform well, but then you look at that service, and then what does that do? How does that impact, your students? How does that impact your family? How does, so those are things, it's tough, but it's rewarding at the same time. So just making sure you have a balance to be able to do that and achieve. And then I've always had this one philosophy, and I wrote this down, and it's always been sometimes the best thing we can do is get out of the way. And what I mean by that is with USA Track, that's I want to get back involved because now I've got a little more time now that my kids are out of the house. But not being there and being the person that's always called to do, I'm not saying they always called me. They have a lot of different people that they call, but um, if you can get out of the way, that allows someone else an opportunity to now move up and to get that experience too. And so when I think of service, that's also something that I think is important is, you know, we can help the next person gain that experience and find themselves in service. And so that's important. So finding the next person to kind of, succession plan, like what's that look like to get that next person, bring somebody with you so that they can move up as well. So I think that that's really important. So sometimes we just got to get out of the way so somebody else can serve.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going with it, and I'm doing my best to do that. So, but it's just finding people, encouraging them to get involved. That's the big part.
For sure.
Mhm.
Well, then with that, to the athletic training chat questions.
Okay.
Um, Curious on this one, just again, because you been involved in so many aspects of AT and especially with the education side. Where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Um,
Just a small question.
well, yeah. So I right now, I mean, we're at critical mass as a profession, I think, and specifically for like our national organization, NATA. I think it's really important for people to engage and be involved. And I really hope that the pendulum is going to shift back towards the middle, and we're going to kind of find some resolution. I really think we're kind of in still that post-COVID recovery phase. We separated from each other because we had to isolate and do things remotely. And we've kind of forgotten the importance of getting everybody back together and being involved in engagement, in person. And so, I think that is something that we've got to figure out how to find that balance and to find out what everybody needs to be able to come back together. And I think that in the conversations that I'm involved with, I think we're getting there as a profession, but we've got a lot of work to do, and we need the help of athletic trainers, that are in the profession. If we want to continue to maintain a cadence to move our profession forward, we've got to support each other. And I think one of the best ways we can do that is invest in the NATA, invest in your district and invest in your state organizations, because if we don't do that, I think we're going to find ourselves in a bad spot. We're just not going to have the support that we need to be able to fight the fights that we're seeing at the state levels. I mean, Iowa just fought something off, and I know that they used district and national level resources that are paid through membership fees and things like that to be able to help them get that through. And Kansas, we had an interesting thing where it was basically you had to apply to be able to come into the state to work as an athletic trainer there for a little while. And because of some of the advocacy and the resources that I was able to reach out to the national level and get some support and some kind of this is a how to, without that, Tina Kirkendall, I don't think I would be able to really have managed that as well. Right. And so I think it's really important that we continue to support our professions so that we can be supported in advance. So I'll step off myself.
Sorry, I think that was me.
No worries.
Uh,
Where'd I lose you?
oh, we're still recording. You had just all the last I heard is I'll step off my soapbox, and then it cut.
Okay, so I mean, I'll step off that NATA and engaging students, where we now have to find a cadence to support getting conferences, because we now we're going curriculum. So, and I think so that for me, I think that's another thing that is important. Um, so I think we've got to find that and then get our students engaged again and figure out a way to give our students time to get to those conferences and engage. Because I think they get a lot out of it and they have to see where you know, for lack of a better term, they need to see where the sausage is made. So they need to get to these conferences and build these relationships and meet people. And that's how we've traditionally done things. So I think that's really important. So I think now that we've gotten through the initial stages and we've gotten most programs that are going to be at the master's level there, I think we're now in a position to be able to do that, hopefully. So hopefully that'll work out.
Agreed. What advice would you go back and give yourself as a young athletic trainer? And if you could set kind of when that time frame would be.
Um, so I think the pivotal moment for me was probably 98. So that was, right as I was ending my master's degree at Oklahoma State. Negotiating my boss at Health South at that time, for what I thought was a really good salary. But, I didn't utilize a lot of the resources that I could have or should have evaluated. The NETA puts out, as a matter of fact. So like the salary survey, things
Right.
like that. Like those are things that I just didn't know about or wasn't aware of. So if I could have given myself advice, it would have been to ask more questions of people who have been through the process before me, to kind of give me some guidance on how do I negotiate, how do I find the right position for myself. And I think the other would be to engage professionally earlier. So they've got lots of different committees for early professionals now that you can now serve on, which would help guide, I think, the older generation and helping support the newer generation as they start to navigate this. And so there, I don't want to say there's a massive disconnect, but there's a little bit of a disconnect. And so we need to figure out a way to get those younger people involved. And so I think that's what I would give my advice to myself is to try to get involved earlier because I didn't really find engagement. And, I've always done volunteer work, but not at like the committee level, NAT level, or, district level, that kind of thing. I found that later in my career. And I think getting involved earlier may have taken me in who knows what direction. But
Absolutely. I echo that. I wish I would have started sooner and learning a lot in my current roles, and we'll see where that takes me along the way.
yeah, yeah, no, I think it's good. So, all right. I
What has been the most influential resource you have found in your career?
think it all comes down to relationships. I think the relationships that I've built with folks, and doing the best job that I can to maintain those relationships. And that's hard sometimes because you distance, geographically, or you distance because of time, and everybody's going through waves in their life, right? They get busy with things, they have family things, or, little kids, and it takes more time, or, you're going through, things with your parents. So I'm at that age now where, I lost my dad a couple of years ago, and my mom, and, trying to navigate that. And um, so as we kind of go through these waves in our lives, it is just to maintain those relationships the best we can. And I go back to track because I think the one great thing that I learned from that was when we had a track meet and we hosted track at University of Arkansas. Every team that came brought an athletic trainer, and there would be, umpteen teams that would come in for, SEC championship or just regular track meet or nationals for indoor. That was amazing to get to know all those folks and to see what they're doing now, and we all had a chance. We were all in the trenches together, and we all had a chance to really kind of develop that bond. And I maintained a lot of those relationships. And I think that because of those relationships, I'm where I'm at in my career now, because, I'm able to talk to these folks, or they call me, or they, I've got some that send me students, there's just these relationships that are cool and important. And, or we send students to them as future employees, that kind of thing. So it's a neat deal. But I think it all comes down to the relationships you have. I say positive, healthy relationships,
Sure,
uh,
sure.
but having those. But I look at some of the folks now that I really respect, and I respected as clinicians. Randy Ballard, who was track and field at Texas and then Illinois, and is now actually the director of sports medicine, University of Illinois. I mean, it's when you think about how many years ago that was when we were working track meets, helping our athletes, and now we're, you know, he's in charge of everything and just crushing it. And so it's just great to know that you've got your colleagues and friends have continued to move through their careers and mature and do it in a good, positive way to support our profession. So,
That's a common one, I think for good reason. As an
yeah,
AT in your role, how do you take care of yourself?
I'm not as great at that as I used to be, but I'm getting better again. So I'm going through the whole return to self care, the importance of that. Trying to get away from having to have a health condition that is now going to require attention. It's now let's prevent health conditions that would require attention. So
Sure.
kind of a new philosophy. So, trying to, my wife is great about our diet at the house. So she's keeping the good food on the table. And I think the exercise piece for me has been the biggest struggle, but that's just carving out time. Um, you know, Looking at what me time means. So, I hunt, and so that's a time, the year that I dedicate to me. Like that's just, and I look forward to that because I go by myself to just sit and think and reconnect and recharge, and that does carry me for months. But I think the thing too is on a daily level, getting up, walking the dog in the morning early, before the sun's up. Those are things that are good for me. It's not just getting the dog out, got to take the dog for a walk. It's like the dog needs to take me for a walk because I need to get out and I need to exercise. I need to get some steps in before I even go to work.
Sure.
And that's some time to really reflect and reconnect and get your mind right for the day. And um, some days it's reminding yourself that you can do hard things when it's 10 below and you got to bundle up and you still got to walk, but it's forcing yourself to do that and commit. And that's been a challenge. I know that's a challenge everybody faces, but I think that's the big thing for me. So think for, and then the spiritual side too is to, dedicate time for, you know, going to church with your family, making sure that that's an important part. And then also, you know, carving out time with your family. And so we've now kind of taken on that. We call it the Blue Bloods dinner in our house. And I hope that's not copyright infringement, but we every Sunday, the kids come home and folks will come up. They'll bring friends with them, but we have dinner at the house on Sundays, and that's we can't do it on Sunday. We try to get it in maybe on Saturday, but we try to have one meal a week where everybody has to sit down at the table and we talk about everything that's going on. And that's pretty cool. And we hope that, we know the kids are going to leave and do things, but we're hopeful that, at some point that we can, maybe it's just once a month or something like that. I don't know, but try to keep that tradition because I think it's something that means a lot to them and it's going to mean a lot to us as we continue to age and as the family continues to grow. So we might have to get a bigger table. I don't know, but
There you go.
first world problems, right? So
If
anyway,
you could
Norma, that's a good one.
if you could change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, a mindset, or anything of your choosing in athletic training, what would it be?
Negative social media comments, bar none. Nothing has made me more angry in my time as an athletic trainer than to see athletic trainers bashing other athletic trainers and using social media to tear people apart um and doing it in that protective virtual world and not having a conversation with somebody. So instead of calling them and saying, hey man, I didn't appreciate that, I just want to have a conversation with you about that, but just then, I'm going to take to social media and I'm going to bash you publicly. And then when, somebody tries to go back to defend themselves, and then it's more. And then it's a snowball effect. And so, I think that there's folks that are in our profession that are doing amazing things on a social media platform to raise awareness and to be positive, and to discuss issues. But I think we have folks that just continue to tear each other apart. And I think that is going to continue to erode at the forward progress that we have as a profession. So as long as we have those people it's fine to speak out, but do it in a productive way. And social media is not a productive way to get a response. I mean, that's just it. I'm not going to get into politics, but we see that every day in politics. Like we've got every side is bashing each other about something or other. But if we're doing that in our own profession, like we're not supporting each other and we're not moving forward together. And so if I could get rid of one thing, that would be it. Like I know I can't, but man, that would, if we could get back to just using it to post pictures of our dogs or post pictures of this is, my view from the office today, and just say, oh man, somebody's working beach volleyball. Wow, that would be awesome, that kind of thing. But we can teach each other things on social media too, but I'm just saying like positive things that are not intended. I mean, if somebody's intentionally trying to tear someone else down or tear a part of our profession down, they are not positively impacting our profession at all. I mean, so I was recently asked, why do I serve? Um, and basically, if there is a problem, you need to be part of the solution. And so if your actions or your words or your I don't know what they call them now. It used to be tweets. Now it's not Twitter. So I don't know if your X's, whatever, your posts, if they're not generating positive forward movement for the profession, why are we doing it? So other than to hear yourself, I mean, at some point. So that's what I would want.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree with that one at all. Final question. What does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
Well, I said I was going to talk about this. So in 1998, as I was finishing up my grad career, I was actually at the track nationals meet in Buffalo, New York, and was introduced to a few friends at that track meet. And, I was at Oklahoma State at the time, and it was already 90 plus degrees. And when I got there, I mean, I had shorts and like long sleeve t-shirts. I didn't bring any warm gear because I had no idea that it was going to be 40 degrees and raining in June in Buffalo. Anyway, so I had to go to the store. But the athletic trainers at Buffalo hosted a party for all the athletic trainers. So beer and wings, why not? It's Buffalo. And so we all went to the stadium and we all had beer and wings and we were hanging out. And I met a young lady there that we just kind of hung out and we were getting to know each other through a mutual friend. And anyway, we ended up running into each other again. Convention was in Baltimore, which is where her sister was currently working at Johns Hopkins. And so we met, ran into each other. I actually was with Eric Warren and Brian Farr. Anyway, I'm not trying to name drop those guys, but they let me crash the Michigan State alumni party. And so I went in to Ronnie Barnes, who is a longtime NFL athletic trainer, had hosted a party at a convention. And Bethany was there, and she goes, "Hey, you were that guy that was wearing a t-shirt and shorts to that party." And we were outside and it was freezing, but I mean, that's all I had. So she remembered me for being stupid, basically. But anyway, yeah, 25 years later now, we've been married for 23 and the rest is history. So I attribute athletic training to a family, and not just my family, but a true family of friends and colleagues. And, we kind of say that here at K-State is like it's all about family and true. It is very true. I have a very strong extended family with the relationships that I've built, but the one that I'm probably the most proud of and the most appreciative of is my actual family. And had I not been there at that track meet, I just, and I think about the chances of me kind of being in that scenario again. Um, But there's, the funnier side of that whole story is, uh, I asked her out on a date while we were in Baltimore, and because we were crashing on somebody's floor because we couldn't afford to stay in our own room. And so uh, she called to discuss what, plans, but we had already had to leave because the person we were crashing with had to leave early for the airport. And so I missed her and we never connected, but she hunted me down through the old NATA directory, which used to be an old phone book that they used to
Nice.
hand out back in the day. And um, she tracked me down and called to apologize, and that's how we actually started reconnecting and talking after that convention. So I mean, ultimately I owe a lot to the NETA and the athletic training profession as a whole for helping my wife find me. I always joke and say that she stalked me a little bit, but
There you go.
it 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 wasn't stalking. It was just finding. So it was pretty cool.
Awesome. It's
All right,
quite the
no,
story.
this has been fun. Yeah, I mean, I've got lots of stories, but I appreciate you doing this and putting a positive platform again for athletic trainers to go, and it's exciting, really exciting to see all the cool people you bring in to talk to, but also just everything that you've done in your career. So I am appreciative of the opportunity today, but also just excited to see all the things you've done and the positivity you're bringing to athletic training, man. So keep up the good work. Appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time. Just before we wrap up, if anybody wanted to connect with you or reach out, what would be the best way for them to do that?
You can just reach out via email, which is P Vardiman at ksu.edu, and be glad to. I'm easy to find. I'm sure there's other bald guys on our website here at K-State, but if you go to the athletic training, faculty page here, you'll be able to find me, and I'll be glad to talk or discuss, um, answer any questions you have.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. It was great to reconnect, and we'll look forward to the next time.
Yeah, no, I look forward to seeing who else you bring on, man. I appreciate it. And,
Sounds good.
hopefully I'll be able to do that follow up and tell you exactly why that heel punch works for nosebleeds. More to
I
come.
will be looking forward to that. We can have like an 18 myths series or something,
Yeah,
and
I
we can
know,
have that
but
included in there.
yeah. Well, the next time, just try it. It's crazy. I'm sure I'm going to get a couple of emails about it, but it's good. Anyway, take
Sounds
care,
good.
man. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yep.